Dr. Vilakazi, thank you so much for your time. How do you react to this? Because this is a governing party. As they sit in plenary with some of the delegates, a lot of people have been saying, do they actually understand how deep this issue of the energy crisis is? So how do you respond then to news that the SANDF is coming in?
Good evening to you, Bongiwe, once again, and to viewers at home, and good evening to Uvuyo. It is highly disturbing. It is horrific, right? It confirms everything that we have been saying as South Africans, that there is something that is smelling fishy at Eskom, and I think that it's relief, right? That is finally some kind of sanity seems to be prevailing, exposure, truth, and I really hope that this call is going to get to the depth of what actually is this problem, right? You could have seen it, Bongiwe, in the manner that there's been this push by coal fundamentalists in the country, you know, to resist the kinds of transformation that we require within Eskom to be able to resolve the energy crisis in the country. And clearly that points to that direction, right? All of this is sitting within this whole coal thing. So I'm very, very relieved, and I'm sure South Africans are relieved at home, and I'm sure we're going to be opening eyes to say, can the Defense Ministry assist us and dig deep into this rot?
But Dr. Villas, make me understand something here. These guys, you're bringing in the members of the South African Defense Force to look at theft of coal, theft of diesel, spares also being stolen, tampering with the quality of coal. Now, do members of the South African National Defense Force have expertise in dealing with these issues? And clearly, these are people who know the system very well. In other words, the internal workings at Eskom. So I hope I could get someone to just clarify us on that, but you can tell me what your understanding is.
You know, Vuyo, my honest assessment of the situation, I mean, it is part of their prerogative, right? But in terms of capacity around issues of security, national security in this particular case, issues of intelligence, we've seen how we have been failed during the July unrests, right, by the security cluster. So to answer your question, whether they do have capacity and capability to deal with this, I really do not know, Vuyo. I hope that they do, for the sake of the country and for the sake of the nation. And if they do not, I would want to believe and trust that there should be mechanisms that are put in place to capacitate any form of security that is needed to be able to dig deep into the situation. It's a matter of national security. It's a matter of national crisis, right? It's urgent, and I think that that's something that we need to prioritize. But I do not necessarily have 100% confidence that the National Defense Force will take us out of this without any additional support. Especially when you know, Vuyo, just at the back of what you've just raised, especially when you think about the fact that when we listen to the SIU speaking to Parliament, some of these employees themselves who, for example, are mixing this coal, responsible for mixing this coal, they take a truck, it passes through the very security at the gate, right? That is supposed to be watching this, comes back with mixed coal, and so that it passes the test fraudulently. Now, these are some of the employees that would then be facing disciplinary action, and others resign just when this disciplinary action comes in, and by the end of 30 days, they leave Eskom without having faced any sanction. We hear this in Parliament as the SIU speaks about this, yet no one is in orange overalls. Totally, Bongiwe, which is what is even more disturbing, right? A lot of people that have been implicated in these corruption scandals are just walking free in South Africa. They can just easily change jobs, change provinces. They can resign from Eskom offices in Gauteng, and you find them somewhere else in Limpopo, and so on. So that is what this is how deeply embedded this problem is, right? This is how stinking it actually is. And really we have to get to the bottom of it as a nation. Otherwise, we're really in a serious crisis here that threatens the security of the nation.
And I think for me, one of the other things is then that when you listen to the president speak yesterday and talk about the energy crisis and saying he understands just what South Africans are grappling with, it's a big problem for South Africans, they must resolve it. But does he really understand? Does the ANC-led government really understand what load shedding has done to this country's economy?
You know, I can tell you now, Bongiwe, I do not think that government has got a clue of the impact of the fact that we're living in darkness as a nation, right? It affects just poor families and households who just had to buy that groceries for those couple of days, who would have to throw it away because it's rotten, and it goes to the local spaza shop, to the guy in the pavements, you know, who is trying to make ends meet with that income, who's not able to do it because he's got no generator. He's not able to purchase that generator, and it goes further to the nation in terms of the business and the economy. It affects everybody. A student that has got to study, who needs light to be able to even, you know, ensure that they have the skills that the South African economy needs, are also struggling with this thing. We're talking about people with chronic illnesses in hospitals, in clinics. You know, sometimes we have to battle just to have equipment that requires electrification in order for them to survive. So there's huge implications, Bongiwe, at all levels in the nation. Basically, it puts the country in a standstill. It's a sabotage. It's an act of sabotage, you know, for lack of a better word. It's actually something that seems to be deliberately done to put the nation into a standstill, to collapse the South African nation, in my view.
One hopes that, I mean, this move to bring in members of the South African National Defence Force has got nothing to do with this conference. You know, because remember, I mean, a few days ago, a lot of people were actually skeptical about Andre de Ruyter's resignation as well. That it is, what a coincidence that it comes like literally a couple of days before the governing party goes into conference, where this issue is going to be a big one. But one hopes that this step too isn't one that is meant to appease people at this conference, but after, I mean, a few days from now, I mean, it will be the last time we hear of this initiative even.
Exactly, Vuyo. I mean, if you look at the story of Eskom, fellow South Africans, this is a problem that started around 1998. Right? We are not talking about something that starts now. Why is it that we are acting now? That's a question that we should be asking ourselves. You know, I mean, already by 1998, there were signs that something is wrong within Eskom, and with the Thabo Mbeki, former President Thabo Mbeki's...
in fact, it was Alec Erwin who said the bolts were found, you know, lying around, pointing to sabotage and so on. Yeah.
Already there were signs. I mean, 1998, how many years now, right? We're almost going to 2028, and the acting is now. And coincidentally, this message comes on the eve of elections of the African National Congress top six, and perhaps even the NEC, and that is worrying, right? That is worrying. It is how politics can be dirty sometimes. We should not be blinded to that particular effect that it is possibly a political strategy to be able to appease the voter at this conference, to say perhaps something is working towards a good direction. Let's vote this particular candidate and not that particular candidate. We know, you know, there's political games that are being played here at the expense of citizens, and Eskom is just not immune to that. In fact, it is the West of the state-owned enterprises that have been targeted for political reasons. Yeah, and even the resignation of the CEO.
Would you say the ANC has held its deployee, Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan, to account when it comes to what we've seen, sufficiently so, to account for this mess that we are seeing at Eskom?
Bongiwe, disappointingly, the African National Congress has failed to hold Minister Pravin Gordhan to account for many, many years. The many voices within South African population, from various opposition voices to civil society organizations to influencers in society, who have been calling on the African National Congress to say, can the Minister Pravin Gordhan explain something to the nation about what's going on at Eskom? And nothing has been coming forth. We've heard today from Umama Onomvula Mokonyane that is actually even missing some of the meetings of the National Executive Committee. He would probably just come in and report for 5-10 minutes and is gone, right? So that is the kind of lack of accountability and lack of oversight that we have seen being demonstrated by the NEC that is outgoing or that is outgone, you know, of the ANC. And we can't be quiet about these things, Bongiwe. We cannot be blinded by small little glitches of, I will call them glitches of hope, right, for lack of a better word, that happen only coincidentally because there's conference, because there's voting that's happening. 5 days down the line, we are back again into darkness. We are back again into saying the Minister of Defense could not get to Eskom. We'll hear stories. We always hear stories. This is a performance of power. It's a parade of power. It's a dance of power. And unfortunately, the ANC is expecting South Africans to just be spectators in this dance.
Because, accountability in the ANC and by extension in government is looked at or seen through the eyes, through very factional eyes. I mean, I've been watching, for quite a while, a spectacle where between Gwede Mandashe and Pravin Gordhan. I mean, he's responsible for energy, the country's energy needs. He's responsible for public enterprises, and Eskom falls under his. But because they belong together, they can't now, hold each other accountable. Even though the one feels strongly about certain things, he can't say those things, or certainly not publicly, or he can't fight, for them, because he doesn't want to offend the comrade he is with in every other fight, within the organization, which is bizarre because at the end of the day, it's South Africa that suffers.
It's insane, Vuyo. It is deeply insane, for lack of a better word. It's insensitive. It is actually abusive. For me, it's an act of violence against citizens. I would even go as far as saying it's actually a crime against humanity, for South Africans. Because if you actually we can do an audit since 1998 with the beginning of the problems of Eskom and check how many people have died, right? Because of lack of facilities in hospitals, because of starvation and hunger, because of so many things that are related to the provision of electricity, you will realize that actually the government has to be held accountable, particularly the ANC, for those kinds of crimes against humanity that are not spoken about in the public domain, because nobody is doing that kind of work of auditing, that kind of work of monitoring, because we all expect government to do it, right? And government is not going to do it, like for the reasons that you're saying. They're not going to stab each other as comrades, right? They always say that in politics there are no enemies. And we know also Gwede Mandashe, the national chairperson of the ANC, is a coal fundamentalist. He belongs to that school of thought and to that school of practice to say coal is something that we cannot get rid of in South Africa. And mainly because there's many things that already we hear today, that are happening, which probably he may be a part of, and it could be that Pravin Gordhan also knows about those things. They are not going to challenge each other, Vuyo, for a simple reason. They're eating from that, and forgetting about an ordinary person in South Africa, who needs food, who needs to eat, who needs this electricity in order to be able to just live their lives.
And, this thorny issue of the just energy transition, then I suppose one asks the question, what happens now? Because you hear a finance minister, Kodongwana, saying delegates must fight against this. So quite a lot of speaking in various voices, and one wonders if this problem of Eskom will ever be solved. But I'm leaving you. Thank you so much for 30 minutes of your company.
It's been a pleasure. You go and rest. We'll be here for the next a few hours, of course, bringing to our ears, all the conversations, all the discussions, the latest developments, what's happening inside plenary. We'll be here for the next few hours. So do stay with us. For now, though, it's back to studio.